Welcome to the latest version. I'm Betsy Bush, your host, with my guest, Danielle Butin. She's founder and CEO of the Afya Foundation. Danielle, I'm so excited to be talking with you now on the latest version. I can't think of anyone who personifies the purpose of this podcast more than you. Many of us have traveled to parts of the world where we're confronted with extreme need and realize the scope of the difference between the quality of life we take for granted and the reality that is for much of the planet. And we resolve to do something. But when we get home, we go back to our old lives and that urgency fades. But you, when you made a trip abroad, you actually kept that fire going. And when you came home, you did something about it. So I am so excited because the story you have to tell is really inspiring and lets us know there's so much more we can do to make things better for the rest of the world. So please tell me about the trip you took to Africa.
Oh, Betsy, first of all, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you. So almost 13 years ago, I was wrapping up a career in an executive position in healthcare, and I wanted something very different, and I had no idea what that would be, and went on vacation to Tanzania, and there life presented what it was going to be. I was in the Serengeti Plains, which I think is just one of the most exquisite places on this earth. And a woman was bawling her eyes out in a tent by herself. And I sat down next to her and I put my hand on her arm and said, "Are you all right? What's happening?" And she said, "I am the woman's health physician in London. I came here to do medical mission work. There are no supplies anywhere. I'm watching children die of conditions I know I can treat with supplies. I am beside myself and I don't know what to do." And she put her head on the table and bawled. And I was overtly aware of my own helplessness in this moment. And I don't do helplessness well. And I felt like I was there for a reason. I believe in seeing beautiful signposts along the way throughout life. And so this to me was one of those moments of a signpost. And I said to her, "Do you think if there were supplies there from another creative way, it could make a difference?" She said, "Any supplies would make a difference." So I, there in the middle of the beautiful Serengeti Plains, decided my next chapter of life was going to be that I was going to go home and figure out how to divert supplies from our waste stream and get them to sites in need abroad that have close to nothing to be able to deliver care.
Wow. Now, when you say divert medical supplies, we're, I think, generally unaware, the lay people here are unaware of the amount of healthcare supplies in hospitals, et cetera, that generally just go to landfill unused that are still usable.
So here's the thing. We have extraordinary practice around sterility of product. And so if somebody has, for example, their elbow scoped, a surgery pack of supplies will be opened, and only those items used are contaminated and on the medical stand. And there could be easily 10 to 20 items that are still in sterile wrapping that were in the room with the patient that were not touched, but because they were in the room, they must be discarded. So we're talking about millions and millions and millions of pounds of supplies are either buried in landfill or they're incinerated. And you juxtapose that against, I was in Tanzania in the operating room years ago where a woman was rushed in for an urgent cesarean section. And halfway through the procedure, the doctor said, "Oh my gosh, we don't have sutures to close." And I remember saying, "How can you open someone's body and not have sutures to close?" And he said, "Well, when we're really stuck, this is what we do." And he pulled a piece of gauze out and they started creating fake sutures with the threads from this piece of gauze. And I'm thinking about the thousands of sutures that are thrown away because of our sterility practice in this country and how that's okay. But then we have to save them and divert them to places like this where no one should be sutured up with pieces of thread from a piece of gauze.
Wow. And talking about something that does not sound at all sterile.
No, not at all. Or Or, Betsy, when people die a death with dignity at home in this country, most of the time, the hospital bed, the mattress, the commode, the wheelchair will not be picked up. The family is told to find a way to donate it or discard it. And if you are in your 70s or 80s or 90s, that is an enormous feat. So we collect everything from hospital beds at homes to doctors' offices closing to materials from hospitals to x-ray machines and anesthesia machines. We sent a CAT scan to Africa. It is the whole composition of supplies that still have a second life in them that are worth rescuing.
Wow. So let's step back a bit. You came home from that trip to Tanzania and you had this desire to start a way of collecting all of these supplies and equipment and sending it off to the places you know needed it. What did you do then? How did you go about starting that nonprofit organization that would allow you to do that?
Well, the first thing I did was I did a needs assessment. And my idea of a needs assessment was to, unannounced and uninvited, walk through the tunnels of the major hospitals of New York City so I could see firsthand what the garbage looks like. And garbage, I don't consider anything that we have in our warehouse garbage, but these are the items that are being discarded from hospitals. And I saw laundry bins and stretchers and pallets of first aid scissors because they were being flipped out for another kind of inventory. And I said, oh, and this is an extraordinary opportunity in New York. And the guys in the tunnels would laugh at me and say, lady, what are you doing down here? And I said, I want you to just show me what ends up in this part of the hospital. And they did. And then I went to Bellevue. And in Bellevue, I was given a tour of a warehouse room that had a tiny bit of water seep into it. But because this tiny bit of water had seeped in, they had to get rid of 27 pallets of goods because they were exposed to water. And they said to me, we're going to give this to you. Do you want it? And I thought, oh, I didn't even have a truck. I didn't have a warehouse. I didn't have a truck. I asked a friend to drive a truck. I live in Westchester County on a narrow road. The truck of 27 pallets sat outside my house for 3 weeks with the police knocking on the door asking when the truck was going to be moved. I mean, this is literally the launch of this work. And I have to say that if I had the least bit of perfectionistic drive, it would have been a complete fail. But because it was just, I'm going to have faith, I literally had faith that something that could be so profoundly moving and meaningful and impactful to be delivered to me in the Serengeti was not going to fail. So I would tolerate the police knocking on the door and the fact that I didn't have a warehouse. I really thought I would start this out of my garage. But it took off so fast and so enormously that we were out of the garage after the first week.
You know, it sounds like one of these entrepreneurial ventures where someone comes up with this great software idea and suddenly everyone's like, I've always needed this. And it was your idea meeting a moment of need where everyone just said, of course, this makes perfect sense.
Yes. And I think that's a great way to describe it. The hospitals we worked with wanted to know that we would show up. You know, I think a lot of people have a lot of good ideas and then they just don't show up and they don't fulfill on what they promise. And I knew, and I continue to, that I'm asking hospitals to do more. It's a lot easier for them to just throw stuff away than it is to invest the time to bag things up, store them, make sure that people know to donate to us. I know I'm asking them for more, but it's worth it. We are not going to throw away good supplies, and people's lives are going to be saved because of it. There was one beautiful moment during the horrible disaster in the Philippines years ago, and I was in a New York City hospital at 5 a.m. training a group of OR nurses in how to recover from the operating room. And all of these expat Philippine nurses came up to me bawling their eyes out, saying, we feel like now we can help home during this horrible disaster. And we've been waiting for a chance to do something with the supplies that we've been seeing thrown away. And it resonates for everybody. It resonates for the donors. It resonates for the recipients. It just makes sense.
And it makes you realize how much goes to waste in our society, doesn't it? It's not just medical supplies. It's food. It's clothing. It's all sorts of things that can be reused and repurposed.
Yes, there's a second life for far more than we even realize.
So when did you actually form your 501c3, your nonprofit organization? And how difficult was that? I mean, you need to find board members and people, you know, in that administrative realm who can help you, that legal realm who can help you. What was that like?
I learned flying by the seat of my pants. So I started Afya, and Afya means health in the Kiswahili language. I named it that. Many people think it's an acronym, but it's really my soulful hat tip to that land. And in the beginning, I really didn't know how to run a non-for-profit, how to launch it, what was involved. I remember I found a firm online, and I paid them a couple $100s to help me incorporate, trademark the name, and it was not going as well as I really wanted it to. And I knew how to lead and how to execute, and nothing was going as I would have liked to lead. So an incredible donor read about our work in the New York Times, and he came to me and he said, "How can I help you?" And I said, number one, I need a truck. And number two, I have got to get this 501c3 status pulled together. And he donated a truck, and he donated to me the funding needed to secure representation from a firm that does extraordinary work with non-for-profits. And they helped move my application through, and it was successful. So I was clear where I needed help. It wasn't just,
incredible.
I don't know what's wrong. I didn't know what was wrong. My paperwork wasn't appropriate or correct. I had made a mistake doing this online, and this firm helped me to understand the bylaws, helped me to understand the role of a board of directors. And then I went out and recruited people I knew in medicine, people I knew in business, people who were my friends, who really believed in this, and I had an amazing initial board to advise me.
What did you do when you encountered skepticism? Because I can imagine, you know, this sounds like a huge thing. Like, how are you going to do this? You know, where are you going to put all this stuff? How are you going to ship it? How are you going you know, I can imagine that a lot of people just said, you know, this is crazy. I can't believe you can do this.
Yeah. That was the chorus behind my life for a while. So, first of all, I have an amazing mother who is the go girl go force, and she was loud and clear around that. But there were many people in my life who thought this was a less than optimal plan and idea. And I think if you're going to take a risk, and this was a really big risk. I mean, I came back from Africa and I was being recruited and interviewed for major leadership positions in aging in New York. And I chose not to pursue that. And, you know, on a personal level, here I was, a divorced mother of 3. I left an executive high-paying job. And now I didn't have a truck. I didn't have a warehouse. I had 27 pallets of inventory outside of my house. And I wasn't making a salary. And so I have created enough in my life to trust my ability to create. And that was the voice I listened to. So the rest was just banter. This is really risky, Danielle. Like, you don't know what you're doing. Do you know enough to be able to do this? What I knew was I could lead and I could figure things out. And I have figured out unbelievably challenging circumstances before, and I'll figure this one out. I mean, you can learn about international shipping. You can learn about these things. It's not a secret sauce, but it takes time in the game. And I chose and made a commitment to myself that I would listen to and trust my own voice and my own experience. And I think that you have to hold true to, or else you can be swept up by the negativity of others.
It would be very easy, I think, trying to get something like this off the ground to listen to the negativity and to listen to the practical and to listen to the, oh, you need something to fall back on, or what happens if you fail. And you have absolutely not failed. I mean, and I encourage everyone to go to afyafoundation.org to see Danielle's organization, which is, well, tell me how big your staff is and how big your warehouse is and how much medical supplies you have shipped out.
So we now have 3 warehouses, 2 in Yonkers we pay for. 1 has been generously donated to us by a donor. And so I'd say we're at about 35,000 square feet in total of the 3. And by virtue of them all being in Yonkers, it helps us. I mean, it is unaffordable to have a warehouse in New York City. So Yonkers is a really good middle point for us. We have about 23 in staff now. We have thousands of volunteers. I mean, unfortunately, not during COVID because we can't have our thousands of beautiful volunteers in the warehouse. But, you know, one of the things that I learned very early was that we need partners. We need many different communities to come together and to kind of bind hands around this as an effort. And so I'm a big believer in who could benefit from this as much as we need help, right? My background is I'm an occupational therapist. And so with that prism, we went out and found treatment programs like YAI and JCCA at the Cottage School and Children's Village, where we could be the place of giving back, and their clientele would come and volunteer with Afya. And then I started adding a graduate occupational therapy internship where these OTs are working with people on the spectrum, people with serious lifelong mental illness and dual diagnoses. And then the DA and the police department started sending us referrals. And the work is gorgeous because under this umbrella of altruism, helping other people, they are giving to themselves and learning skills needed.
So people would come in, like, put all the scissors in one pile and put all the sutures in another pile and things like that. And is that how?
Yes, because it comes to us. Betsy, the materials come to us in, it is such a mishmash of stuff. And I will never send to sites that are in trouble and under-resourced stuff how it comes to us. So if you're opening a box of 4x4 gauze, that's all you're going to see in it. But it means we need a lot of hands on deck.
So how do you prioritize? I can imagine you have a to-do list and everything's like, number 1 on the to-do list. Do you have any tips you could pass along to someone who feels overwhelmed with all the different things she needs to do? How do you prioritize what really needs to happen first?
Well, it's interesting. Now that I have staff, if you'd asked me 11 years ago, how do I do this? It probably would have been very different because now I look at what I can delegate, that if I invest the time in right now, then someone else is taking it and it's worth that time and investment. I ask myself questions every morning and every night, what requires my attention and me owning it versus somebody else being able to do it. I am trying desperately to stay involved in high level kind of strategic design of where we can be the most helpful and who our partners can be there and how we can raise funds to support that effort and try to rely on my amazing team to make the rest of this magic happen. And I think it is where am I needed right now. It is very tempting when you have a long list of things to accomplish to be seduced by the easiest or the most gratifying first. But it's not how I look at my list. And I don't live with perfection, Betsy. And I think that's a big piece here is if being perfect isn't the goal, you give yourself a lot of slack in how you work it.
Yeah. Interesting. Tell me how you decide who gets what and where does it go in the world, and how do you decide or figure out who needs what and how does it get there?
So we have some amazing partners around the world who we've been working with for years. There has to be a doctor and a nurse and a solid clinic. Like we've had people call us from a remote village far away saying, we really need your medical supplies. And unless there's a doctor or a nurse there who can safeguard the materials. I mean, I remember we worked with the second lady of Ghana years ago. She literally chained an ultrasound to a wall to make sure that it was never going to move from the hospital that she donated it to with us helping her, and that she would never have to worry about it. And so we are working so hard on behalf of people we'll never know that we have to know that these goods are going to be put to the use that they're intended. So we have amazing partners worldwide. And when people come to us and say, one project that was so moving was when someone affiliated with the American Cancer Society lived in the Bahamas long before the recent storm and said, I want to fund a hospice in the Bahamas. There's no hospice and I want to create it. And we have a building, but we have none of the supplies. And Betsy, we were able to bring this person's vision to life. So people do come to us with special projects and we love that. But with COVID, we have kept our partners abroad. We've done some amazing work abroad during this, but we are turning our attention to the federally qualified health centers in our country and in New York, because what people are not realizing is that although the vaccine is now ramping up, thankfully, there are health centers for people who are incredibly poor or undocumented, or sites where they are serving families in desperate need. And some of these centers have said to us, we don't have specimen cups, we don't have syringes. A whole bunch of these centers closed in New Jersey because they didn't have enough medical supplies and they didn't have PPE. So we are setting our sights on supporting them holistically. Like one of the centers in New York City called us and said, in addition to PPE, could you please send us wheelchairs and walkers and crutches and canes so that if the people who are at risk for falling have a way not to fall, they won't end up in the ER and they won't be exposed to COVID. Like those holistic, big picture thinking providers of care for people who are just impoverished, we're in. So that's become our focus during COVID, and we're doing that in Navajo Nation in spades. We just sent 1.6 million masks out to Navajo Nation. But this is the work that now we're focusing on domestically while we're also still supporting people abroad.
That's incredible. And it is a little humbling to think that there are communities right around us who are in need of basic supplies as much as a community on the other side of the world.
It's shocking. It is shocking, actually. And I think COVID has just shown us the lack of just social justice around medical care and medicine in this nation. It is unbelievable to those of us on the side of the supply chain.
In this whole venture of yours, what has been the biggest surprise?
I think how eager people are to find their way to contributing to the lives of others. It has been humbling and an honor to serve as that place and for people to find a unique contribution to the work that we do. So I'm going to give you an example of this. Was during the Haiti earthquake, there was this delicious 5-year-old boy who walked into the warehouse with this little Ziploc bag. And his mother was holding his hand, and he was, I can still see his face. He was such a delicious child. And I walked up and I said, "Hi, can I help you?" And his mother looked at him and he said, "I get 10 cents every week for my allowance. And I saved 10 dimes and I put them in this bag so you can help kids in Haiti that I saw on TV." And my eyes welled up. And here's this child understanding, like, go mama, as far as I'm concerned. I looked at her and I thought, you are something to have this 5-year-old showing up with his bag. And I looked at him and I said, I promise you someone will benefit from what you're doing here. And you don't have to know people to help them. And this is so beautiful. And that's Afya's goodness, is it people figure out a way to come in and give there without specific rules and guidelines. They find their way.
That's amazing. And it's great to have, to know that you've started an organization where so many people can help others, and how healing it is for those who are helping. It's not just about people who are on the receiving end. It's also about how good it feels to know that you're doing something good, even if you'll never meet those people.
I totally agree. I think altruism, I'm a firm believer that if you're having a bad day, go help someone. Go do something really lovely for another, and it was going to change you chemically.
You had an interesting, and I'm cheating a little bit because I heard you interviewed about someone in Haiti who was offered a cane and did not want to take it. Maybe you can just kind of pick up that story because I think it's so amazing.
Yeah, so that was Haiti is a master teacher. And every time I would leave Haiti, I would write because the lessons there were monstrous and life-changing. We were giving away, we were treating people who had been recently disabled. After the earthquake, thousands of people had traumatic amputations, were really disabled. And we started a rehab program. And we gave away, and we trained Haitians to become rehab technicians and builders of products. It was fantastic. And we gave away, because how could you ever charge people for items when, over 95% were unemployed? So we gave these items away. And there was this beautiful farmer. He was in his 70s or 80s, walked over with this huge branch of a tree. And the team in Creole said to him, please stay right here for a second. Let us go get a cane for you. And he said, no, tomorrow. I'll come back tomorrow. And he came back with this basket of peppers from his garden. And he said, now I'll take the cane. And it was such a lesson in charity and not wanting a handout and wanting to be treated with dignity and integrity. And they traded the peppers for the cane. And the staff, I remember the staff in that moment looking over at a group of us like, do we take the peppers? And it was like, take the peppers. You have to take the peppers, because he needed to feel that, and he deserved to feel that.
Absolutely. It was so important to his dignity to know that he was not getting a handout. He didn't want a handout. He wanted to be able to exchange, or in air quotes, pay for it. It reminds me of a fundraising lesson I had heard long ago that continues to stay with me. Never deny someone the opportunity to give.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Danielle, I always try to end my podcasts with 3 pieces of advice that you would have for my listener, and your whole life's journey and the amazing work that you're doing with Afya. What 3 pieces of advice would you offer to someone who is really looking to pivot or make a change or reinvent herself? What could you pass along?
Okay, so first is there is something unrealistically grandiose about having an idea and then all of a sudden you're going to make money doing it. I made like practically nothing for the first few years. So I built a bridge between my old career consulting and doing a lot of teaching so that I could make a living while I ramped up Afya. So I think you got to build bridges in the ramping up, or else it's just an unrealistic expectation and it's way too much pressure.
That's very good to know.
2 is you have to be really careful what voice inside of you you're going to listen to. And we talked about this earlier, but I think fear, the fear doubting Thomas, is not going to compel or move you forward. And you have to choose that every single day, that thanks for coming, but you're not staying at my table. I'm going to listen to the other voice that just keeps me moving forward. And 3, perfection is a killer for innovation. So, and when something becomes really absurd, like so absurd, I can't even begin to like wrap my arms around it, I burst out laughing. And while my team has come to know that things are really bad as they're going on and on around something, and I just burst out laughing because it's so absurd what I'm listening to. I can't believe it. It helps me to stay in a place of being open to solutions, so that if every time we were presented with something that is so mind-blowing absurd, instead of melting into our seat or becoming angry or becoming paralyzed, we could lighten it so that there's room for innovation. It saves us. So I have a senior team that when it gets really horrendous and I burst out laughing and they all burst out laughing. And then I say, now we got to like come up with something. There's something about it re-gauging the temperature of the room that really works.
Interesting. I bet you are a great person to work for because it just sounds like you're someone who can be human and humane and, again, not letting the perfect be the enemy of the, or what is the expression? Not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yes.
Right? It's in the end, are we advancing the ball?
Yes, that's exactly it.
And how many tons of medical supplies have you sent out to date? I've seen a couple of different things. It must be hard to keep all your social media posts updated with the absolute latest amount. Yeah, right.
I know. I'm sorry about that. Changes daily. We are over 11 million pounds.
Wow.
We have touched 83 nations. It's really, and it is an ongoing story of greening locally, sorting and helping, and then making an enormous difference in the lives of people we will never know. And I really firmly believe this because the need exists, we do. And I think it is so extraordinary that people will go to their clinic or they'll go to their local hospital because we only support the infrastructure. I mentioned this earlier. I want to support the bones of the place we're serving, not people coming in. And they'll never know that all these people are working so hard so that they can recover and live. And every life matters.
Amazing. Danielle Butin, CEO and founder of Afya Foundation, AFYA. Please go to their website, afyafoundation.org. It is an amazing group, and Danielle, you are an amazing person. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Oh, Betsy, thank you for offering this today. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, wonderful. Take care, Danielle. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And follow the show at The Latest Version Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. And visit thelatestversionpodcast.com for more about me and my guests. I'm Betsy Bush, and this is my latest version.